My ex-husband reported me to CPS for discipline they taught me. The CPS caseworker's business card trembled in my hands as I stared at the name printed in neat black letters, Margaret Chen, Child Protective Services. She'd just left my doorstep 20 minutes ago, and I was still processing her words. We've received a report regarding physical discipline methods used on Lily and Connor Walsh, she'd said, clipboard in hand, I scanning my living room like she was cataloging evidence. The caller expressed serious concerns about bruising and excessive punishment. My ex-husband David had actually done it. After 8 months of increasingly bitter custody disputes, he'd pulled the nuclear option. The irony was so twisted it made me physically sick. He was reporting me for the exact discipline methods his family had drilled into me during our 6-year marriage. I sank onto my couch, remembering how his mother Patricia had cornered me when Lily was barely 3. Spare the rod, spoil the child, Sarah, she'd said, demonstrating how the Walsh family handled defiance. David had nodded approvingly from the doorway. This is how we were all raised. Look how well we turned out. Back then, I'd been 26 and desperate to fit into his perfect suburban family. When Connor threw tantrums or Lily talked back, David would hover over me with that expectant look. Are you going to let them disrespect you like that? He'd ask. My mother never would have tolerated this behavior. So I'd followed their methods. The wooden spoon for serious infractions. Timeouts in the basement storage room for an hour. No dinner when they were deliberately difficult. Patricia praised me for finally learning proper parenting, and David would smile that satisfied smile that meant I was being a good Walsh wife. The divorce changed everything. Suddenly, David was Mr. Gentle Parenting in front of lawyers and mediators. When I mentioned wanting to maintain consistency with discipline, he'd look horrified. I don't believe in hitting children, Your Honor, he'd said during our custody hearing last month, like I was some kind of monster. Now my 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Connor were at his house for their Wednesday overnight visit, probably being plied with ice cream and promises while their father built his case for why mommy was dangerous. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Emma. How did the meeting with that lawyer go yesterday? The lawyer. Rebecca Martinez had been straightforward about my chances if a CPS investigation found merit in David's claims. Even if it's unfounded, the report stays on file, she'd explained. And judges take any history with CPS very seriously in custody cases. I'd been so panicked yesterday that I barely absorbed her advice about documentation. But now, staring at Margaret Chen's card, something clicked. David wasn't stupid, this was calculated. He'd probably been planning this for months, maybe recording our phone conversations about the kids' behavior, documenting every time I mentioned putting Connor in timeout or taking away Lily's privileges. But David had made one crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that I documented things too. I walked to my bedroom closet and pulled down a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were printed emails, old phones, and a small digital recorder I'd used for work presentations. Buried underneath were screenshots of text conversations from when we were married, messages where David had explicitly told me how to handle the children. Asterisk Lily needs to learn consequences have meaning. Once what won't kill her. Asterisk read one text from March 2019. Asterisk Connor spent dinner crying? Good. Maybe he'll remember that next time he wants to throw food. Asterisk said another from July of that same year. I had dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. David thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. Time to show him how wrong he was. The first recording I found made my stomach drop. It was from October 2019, right after Connor had started kindergarten and was having meltdowns about homework. David's voice came through tinny but clear on my old phone. Sarah, you're being too soft. He's manipulating you with those tears. Put him in the basement room until he's ready to apologize and do his work properly. And I mean really apologize, not that fake sorry he does. My own voice responded, uncertain, but he's only 5, David. Maybe we could try. No. This is exactly what my father would have done with me. Connor needs to learn that defiance has consequences. Real consequences. Trust me on this. I remember that night clearly now. Connor had cried himself to sleep on the storage room floor because I'd been too scared to go against David's instructions. When I'd finally brought him upstairs 3 hours later, David had praised me for finally showing some backbone as a mother. My hands shook as I scrolled through more recordings. There were at least 30 audio files from arguments about the kids, most of them David lecturing me about being too permissive and needing to toughen up like his mother had taught him. But it was the video I found that made everything click into place. Christmas 2020. David filming Lily opening presents while Connor sat in the corner, banished there for allegedly breaking ornaments. On the video, you could hear David's approving whisper, see how much better behaved Lily is when Connor isn't getting attention for acting out. You're learning, babe. Mom would be so proud of how you handled this morning. The timestamp showed Connor had been sitting there for over 2 hours on Christmas morning while David filmed it like some kind of family memory. What kind of father documents his own son's punishment like a trophy? My phone rang, jolting me back to the present. Patricia Walsh's name flashed on the screen. I hadn't spoken to David's mother since the divorce papers were signed, but I answered anyway. Sarah, dear, her voice dripped false sweetness. I heard there might be some concerns about how you've been managing the children. Did you now? I kept my voice steady. Well, I just want you to know that if CPS needs character references about your parenting methods, I'd be more than happy to share what I witnessed during your marriage. Some of those punishments seemed quite harsh, even by our family standards. The threat was crystal clear. Patricia was ready to throw me under the bus to protect her precious son, conveniently forgetting every lesson she drilled into me about proper discipline. That's interesting, Patricia, I said, pulling up a particularly damning text thread on my laptop. Because I have a message here from David, dated February 2020, where he specifically tells me you suggested using the wooden spoon when Lily had that phase of talking back. Said you told him it worked wonders on him and his brothers. Silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then, I'm sure you're misremembering. I'm sure I'm not. I screenshot the message thread, just in case. But thank you for calling. This conversation has been very illuminating. I hung up before she could respond. So this was how they wanted to play it. David gets to be the reformed father who's evolved beyond physical discipline, while Patricia rewrites history to paint me as the abusive outsider who corrupted their perfect family values. They'd probably been planning this character assassination for months, maybe since the custody evaluation started going poorly for David last fall. But they'd underestimated one crucial thing: I'd learned to be paranoid from living with David Walsh for 6 years. And paranoid people keep very, very detailed records. I spent the next 3 hours going through every digital trace of my marriage to David Walsh. What I found was worse than I'd remembered. The text from April 2019 made me physically nauseous. Asterisk Sarah, Connor needs to understand that crying doesn't get him out of consequences. Leave him in the basement room until bedtime. No dinner, no water, no checking on him. He's tougher than you think. Asterisk. My response showed just how thoroughly David had manipulated me. Asterisk, but it's been 4 hours already. He's only 5. Asterisk. Asterisk, and he'll be 6 soon. Stop babying him. This builds character. Asterisk. I remembered that night. Connor had wet himself because I'd been too afraid to let him use the bathroom, thinking David would see it as me giving in. When I'd finally found him curled up in the corner at 9 p.m., soaked and shivering, David had shrugged and said, well, now he knows actions have consequences. But here was the smoking gun. I had David's follow-up text from the next morning, sent while he was at work. Asterisk, see how much better Connor's behavior is today? No tantrums at breakfast. You're finally learning how to be a real mother instead of his friend. Dad would be proud. Asterisk. David's father. Robert Walsh had died 3 years ago, but I suddenly remembered something Margaret Chin, the CPS worker, had mentioned almost in passing during her visit. We do background checks on all family members involved in custody situations. I opened my laptop and searched for Robert Walsh's obituary, then cross-referenced it with public records. What I found sent ice through my veins. Robert James Walsh, age 67, had died while under investigation by Adult Protective Services for elder abuse of David's grandmother. The case had been closed due to his death, but the preliminary findings were public record. Multiple hospitalizations. Suspicious injuries. And a note that other family members had been uncooperative with the investigation. David had never mentioned any of this. Neither had Patricia. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this is Margaret Chin from CPS. I'd like to schedule a follow-up interview for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please confirm your availability. Asterisk. My stomach dropped. Follow-up interviews usually meant they'd found something worth investigating further. But then I noticed something odd. Margaret Chen had given me her business card this morning, and I'd entered her contact information into my phone. This message was coming from a completely different number. I called the CPS main office, heart hammering. Child Protective Services, how may I help you? Hi, I'm trying to reach Margaret Chen. She came to see me this morning about my children, Lily and Connor Walsh. A pause. Ma'am, I show Margaret Chen is in court all day tomorrow. She wouldn't have scheduled any appointments. Can I ask how you received this scheduling request? The fake text. David was still playing games. Never mind, I said quickly. I'll call back later. But now I was thinking clearly for the first time in hours. If David was desperate enough to impersonate a CPS worker, he was scared. Really scared. Which meant I had more power than I'd realized. I pulled up Rebecca Martinez's number and called my lawyer. Rebecca, it's Sarah Walsh. I need to move fast on something. How quickly can we request David's phone records for the custody case? Phone records? Sarah, what's going on? David's been documenting everything I do with the kids, but I think he's been stupid about it. If he's been recording our calls or saving our text conversations to build this CPS case, those same records will show him instructing me to use those discipline methods. Rebecca's voice sharpened with interest. And if we can prove he orchestrated this whole setup, then we flip this entire custody battle on its head. I can file the motion first thing Monday morning. But Sarah, if you have evidence of him manipulating the system or filing false reports, we need everything you can find. I looked at my shoebox of documentation, then at the fake text still glowing on my phone screen. Trust me, I said. I'm just getting started. After hanging up with Rebecca, I stared at that fake text from the bogus CPS number. David had always been tech-savvy, but impersonating a government worker was a federal crime. He was getting reckless, which meant I was getting under his skin. But I needed more than his panic. I needed evidence that would bury him. I opened my laptop and logged into the cloud storage account I'd forgotten about, the one David had set up for us to share family photos during our marriage. He'd insisted on having access to all my accounts back then, claiming it was about transparency and trust. What he'd never realized was that it went both ways. The shared folder was still active. And David, apparently, was still using it. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the recent uploads. Over 40 files dated within the last 3 months, all labeled with clinical precision: Lily Discipline 10 to 15, Connor Behavioral Issues 11-02, Sarah Phone Call 11 to 18. He'd been building a case against me since October. The first video made my hands shake. It was Lily at his house last week, crying about a scraped knee from falling off her bike. David's voice came from behind the camera. Did mommy teach you to cry over every little thing? What does mommy do when you get hurt? She tells me to be tough, Lily sniffled. And sometimes she says crying doesn't fix anything. Does mommy ever get angry when you cry? Sometimes. She says Walsh kids don't whine. I felt sick. Those were David's words, his family's phrases, but coming from Lily's mouth they sounded damning. He'd coached her. My 7-year-old daughter was being manipulated into building a case against her own mother. The audio file labeled Sarah Phone Call 11 to 18 was worse. It was our conversation from last week when Lily had gotten in trouble at school for pushing another kid. David's voice: so what's your plan for consequences? My voice: I'll probably have her write an apology letter and lose screen time for the weekend. That's it? Sarah: she physically hurt another child. This is exactly what we talked about. She needs real consequences or she'll think violence is acceptable. I'm not going to spank her for pushing someone, David. Why not? It worked when we were married. Remember how well-behaved both kids were when you actually followed through with discipline? I'd walked right into his trap. The recording cut off there, but I knew he'd gotten exactly what he wanted, me referencing physical discipline in response to his prompting. But David had made a crucial mistake. These recordings proved he was still trying to manipulate my parenting decisions. Any decent lawyer could show this was ongoing psychological manipulation, not genuine concern for the children. My phone rang. Connor's name popped up. He was calling from David's house. Mommy? His little voice was shaky. Daddy says I need to tell you something important. Ice flooded my veins. What is it, baby? He says I need to remember all the times you made me sit in the dark room when I was bad. He keeps asking me questions about it. I could hear David coaching in the background. Tell Mommy how scared you were. Connor, honey, put Daddy on the phone. Daddy says I'm not supposed to. He says I need to practice remembering for when the nice lady comes to talk to me. The CPS interview. David was coaching Connor to testify against me. Connor, listen to Mommy very carefully. You don't have to practice anything, okay? Just tell the truth about whatever you remember. Can you do that? But Daddy says. The line went dead. I immediately called back. David answered on the first ring. Don't ever hang up on me when I'm talking to my son, I said through gritted teeth. Connor's upset. I think it's best if we limit contact until after his interview with CPS. You can't restrict my phone access. It's in our custody agreement. I can if I believe the children are being coached or manipulated during calls. David's voice was smugly confident. I'm documenting everything, Sarah. Every conversation that upsets them. He hung up. I stared at my phone, rage burning through the fear. David was isolating my children from me while simultaneously coaching them to lie about our life together. But his arrogance had just given me the final piece of evidence I needed. I pulled up the recording app on my phone and checked the settings. Automatic cloud backup was still enabled. Every call I'd made in the past year was saved online, including the one where David had just admitted to restricting my court-ordered access and coaching the children for CPS interviews. Game on, you bastard. I called Rebecca Martinez at 6:47 p.m., knowing she'd probably still be at the office. Sarah? What's wrong? You sound. David just violated the custody order, I said, pacing my kitchen. He cut off my call with Connor and said he's limiting contact until after the CPS interviews. I have it recorded. He what? Rebecca's voice sharpened. That's contempt of court. We can file an emergency motion. There's more. I found his evidence folder. Rebecca, he's been recording everything for months. Videos of the kids, audio of our calls, even coaching them on what to tell CPS. Silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then, are you absolutely certain about this? I'm looking at 43 files right now. He uploaded them to our old shared cloud account and forgot I still had access. I clicked through the folder again, my stomach churning at the clinical labels. There's a video from yesterday of him asking Lily leading questions about discipline. And another one where he's clearly coaching Connor to remember being scared. Sarah, if you can prove he's coaching the children and manipulating evidence, this changes everything. But we need to be extremely careful about how we obtained this information. It's a shared marital account that was never closed. Completely legal access. Good. Download everything immediately. Every file, every timestamp. And Sarah? Don't let David know you found this yet. After hanging up with Rebecca, I spent 2 hours methodically downloading and cataloging David's evidence collection. What I found painted a picture of calculated manipulation that made me sick. The most damaging file was labeled Patricia Coaching Notes 11 to 20. It was a voice memo David had made for himself, apparently after talking with his mother. Mom suggests focusing on the basement timeouts. Connor's age makes those look worse than the other stuff. Need to work on Lily's story about the wooden spoon incident from 2019. She doesn't remember it clearly, but Mom thinks we can refresh her memory with some leading questions. Also need Connor to emphasize how scared he was, not just that he cried. He was literally planning to implant false memories in my children. But the next file made everything click into place. CPS timeline strategy was a detailed document outlining David's entire plan. Phase 1, document current discipline methods through recorded calls, complete. Phase 2, file CPS report with specific incidents that can't be easily disproven, complete. Phase 3, coach children's statements to align with report, in progress. Phase 4, provide reluctant testimony about past concerns during marriage. Phase 5, request emergency custody modification pending investigation results. David hadn't just reported me to CPS on impulse. This was a months-long strategy to steal my children. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Walsh, *Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation today. Perhaps we should meet for coffee tomorrow to discuss the children's well-being. I'm sure we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement, *. A mutually beneficial arrangement. She was offering to make a deal. I texted back, what kind of arrangement? Her response came within minutes, *. David is willing to withdraw the CPS report if you agree to supervised visitation only. The children have been through enough trauma. This could all go away quietly, *. There it was. David knew his case was shaky, so now he was trying to blackmail me into giving up my parental rights voluntarily. But Patricia had just made a crucial mistake. She'd admitted in writing that David was willing to withdraw a CPS report, implying he had control over an investigation that was supposed to be based on genuine concern for child welfare. I screenshot her message and called Rebecca again. They're trying to make a deal, I said without preamble. Patricia just texted offering to make the CPS report go away if I accept supervised visitation only. That's actually perfect, Rebecca said slowly. Sarah, this proves the report was filed in bad faith. CPS investigations don't just disappear because the reporter changes their mind. She's essentially admitting they're using the system as leverage. So what do? We let them think you're considering it while we prepare to destroy them. How quickly can you put together a timeline of every instance David instructed you to use physical discipline? I looked at my shoebox of evidence, then at the dozens of files I downloaded from David's folder. Give me until Monday morning. Perfect. Because I'm going to request an emergency hearing for Tuesday. We're going to present everything at once, his coaching of the children, his manipulation of evidence, his bad faith use of CPS, and most importantly, proof that he's the one who insisted on these discipline methods in the first place. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of coffee and settled in for a long night. David thought he was playing chess, moving pieces methodically toward checkmate. But he'd forgotten one crucial rule: always protect your king. And I was about to prove that his entire strategy had left him completely exposed. I worked until 3 a.m. Sunday morning, building a timeline that painted David's manipulation in stark detail. By dawn, I had everything organized into a devastating presentation: 37 text messages where David explicitly instructed harsh punishments, 12 recordings of him criticizing me for being too soft, and his own uploaded files proving he'd coached the children. But when I woke up at 7 a.m. to my phone ringing, everything changed. Ms. Walsh? This is Detective Rivera with the County Sheriff's Department. We need to speak with you about a report filed last night. My blood turned to ice. What kind of report? Can you come to the station this morning? It's regarding allegations of child endangerment and evidence tampering. David had escalated. Somehow he'd found out about the cloud files. I called Rebecca, hands shaking. David reported me to the police. They want me to come in for questioning about evidence tampering. Don't say another word to anyone, Rebecca said immediately. I'm meeting you at the station. Sarah, did you access anything you weren't legally authorized to see? The shared cloud account was still in both our names. I checked the terms of service. Good. But this tells me David's desperate. He's throwing everything at the wall hoping something sticks. 2 hours later, I sat in interview room B at the County Sheriff's Department while Detective Rivera reviewed my statement. Rebecca sat beside me, occasionally interjecting when questions veered into inappropriate territory. So you're claiming your ex-husband has been planning the CPS report for months? Detective Rivera asked, scrolling through printed screenshots on his tablet. Not claiming. Proving. I slid David's CPS timeline strategy document across the table. He wrote out his entire plan. Phase by phase. Detective Rivera's eyebrows rose as he read. This document came from the shared account? Yes. Along with recordings of him coaching my 7-year-old daughter about what to tell investigators. And you believe he filed a false CPS report? Rebecca leaned forward. Detective, we have text messages from the paternal grandmother admitting the report could be withdrawn in exchange for my client accepting reduced custody. That's not how legitimate child welfare concerns work. Detective Rivera studied the Patricia text thread for a long moment. No, it's not. He looked up at me. Ms. Walsh, I need to ask directly, have you ever struck your children with an object or locked them in rooms as punishment? The question I'd been dreading. Yes, I said quietly. But only following methods my ex-husband's family insisted were necessary. I have documentation of every instance where he specifically instructed these punishments. Why did you follow those instructions? I thought about David's satisfied smile when I'd finally learned proper parenting. Patricia's approval when I stopped being too permissive. The constant pressure to prove I belonged in their family. Because I was 26 years old, isolated from my own support system, and desperate to be accepted by his family, I said. David's mother taught me these methods. David reinforced them. And now David's using them against me. Detective Rivera made notes for several minutes. Finally, he looked up. Ms. Walsh, based on the evidence you provided, I'm inclined to believe someone's been manipulating this situation. But it's not you. Relief flooded through me so fast I felt dizzy. However, he continued, I need to interview your children directly. Without either parent present. My stomach dropped. When? This afternoon. Social services will handle the interviews, but given the allegations of coaching, we need uncontaminated statements. After leaving the station, Rebecca and I grabbed coffee at a diner down the street. My hands were still shaking. Sarah, this is actually going better than I expected, Rebecca said, stirring sugar into her mug. Detective Rivera sees through David's manipulation. But what if the kids say what David coached them to say? Then we have evidence proving they were coached. Connor's only 6. If his story sounds rehearsed or uses adult vocabulary about emotional trauma, that's actually helpful to us. My phone buzzed. Emma, my sister, just saw David at Target with the kids. Lily looked upset. Connor wouldn't make eye contact. Should I approach them? I showed Rebecca the text. She frowned. He's not supposed to have them today. Sunday custody is yours. Another violation. I was starting to see the pattern. David kept pushing boundaries, assuming his victim would be too overwhelmed to fight back effectively. But I wasn't that scared 26-year-old anymore. I texted Emma back, take photos if you can do it discreetly. Don't approach *. Then I called Detective Rivera. Detective? David has my children when it's my custody time. My sister just spotted them at Target on Maple Street. We'll send a unit to check it out, he said immediately. Ms. Walsh, your ex-husband is making this very easy for us. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. David, furious. What the hell did you do? Police just showed up demanding to see our custody agreement. I didn't do anything, David. You're the one violating court orders. This is harassment. I'm documenting everything. Good, I said calmly. Document this too, I'm done being afraid of you. I hung up and smiled for the first time in days. The call from Detective Rivera came at 4:17 p.m., just as I was pacing holes in my kitchen floor waiting for news about the children's interviews. Ms. Walsh, we've completed the preliminary interviews with Lily and Connor. Can you come back to the station? And bring your lawyer. His tone was carefully neutral, which made my stomach clench. Are they okay? They're fine. We'll discuss everything when you get here. Rebecca met me in the parking lot 20 minutes later, her expression grim. Sarah, I need to prepare you. Children's interviews can go any direction, especially when they've been coached. Just tell me straight, how bad could this be? Worst case? David's manipulation worked and they corroborated his version of events. Best case? They told the truth and inconsistencies in coaching became obvious. Detective Rivera was waiting in the same interview room, along with a woman I didn't recognize. She introduced herself as Dr. Amanda Foster, the child psychologist who'd conducted the interviews. Ms. Walsh, Dr. Foster began, I want you to know that both Lily and Connor are bright, articulate children who clearly love both their parents. The but was coming. I could feel it. However, there were some concerning patterns in their statements that we need to discuss. She opened a folder and pulled out handwritten notes. Connor described being placed in what he called the dark thinking room for extended periods. He used very specific language, phrases like learning consequences and building character, that seemed rehearsed. My heart sank. David's coaching had worked. But here's what's interesting, Dr. Foster continued. When I asked Connor who taught him those phrases, he said Daddy and Grandma Patricia. When I asked what Mommy said during these punishments, he said you often seemed sad and would come check on him even when you weren't supposed to. I blinked. That wasn't what David had coached him to say. Lily's interview was even more revealing, Detective Rivera added. She described the wooden spoon incidents, but when Dr. Foster asked whose idea it was, Lily said Grandma Patricia showed Mommy how to do it right because Mommy was doing it wrong. Hope flickered in my chest. What does that mean? Dr. Foster leaned forward. It means your children weren't successfully coached because they're telling a more complex truth. They remember the punishments, but they also remember the family dynamics around them. Connor specifically said Daddy got mad when Mommy was too nice to us. There's more, Detective Rivera said. Connor asked me if he was in trouble for telling the truth instead of the story Daddy practiced. Those are his exact words. Rebecca grabbed my arm. Sarah, this is huge. Connor just admitted to being coached. Both children showed signs of recent stress that's inconsistent with historical trauma, Dr. Foster explained. Their anxiety seems focused on saying the right thing to make Daddy happy, not on processing past punishment. In my professional opinion, these children are being actively manipulated in the present, not recovering from past abuse. I felt tears stinging my eyes. So they're okay? They're confused and stressed by being put in the middle of adult conflicts, Dr. Foster said gently. But there's no indication of severe trauma or ongoing abuse. What I see are children who've experienced inconsistent discipline within a manipulative family dynamic, followed by recent coaching to exaggerate certain memories. Detective Rivera closed his file. Ms. Walsh, based on these interviews and the evidence you provided, we're recommending that CPS shift their investigation focus to your ex-husband's household. The pattern of manipulation and coaching raises serious concerns about emotional abuse. What happens now? CPS will be making an unannounced visit to David's house tomorrow morning. They'll be asking him some very pointed questions about why his children were coached to give specific testimony. Rebecca was already making notes. And the custody violations? He'll be charged with contempt of court for the custody violations today. But Sarah, Detective Rivera looked at me seriously. You need to be prepared for David to escalate further. Men like him don't handle losing control well. As if summoned by his words, my phone started buzzing with calls from David's number. I let them go to voicemail. The first message was furious. Sarah, I don't know what lies you told them, but this isn't over. Those kids are confused and traumatized by your manipulation. The second was more calculating. I'm filing for emergency custody modification tomorrow. No judge will leave children with someone under CPS investigation. The third made my blood run cold. You're going to regret destroying this family. I promise you that. Detective Rivera frowned as he listened to the messages. We're going to need copies of these. Ms. Walsh, has your ex-husband ever made threats before? I thought about David's carefully controlled anger during our marriage, the way he could make threats sound like concerned observations. Not directly. David's too smart for explicit threats. But he knows how to make people feel afraid without saying anything actionable. Well, these messages are getting close to actionable, Detective Rivera said. We'll be documenting everything. As we left the station, Rebecca's phone rang. She answered, then immediately stopped walking. What do you mean he's already filed? She said into the phone. It's Sunday evening, how is that possible? She hung up and turned to me with a worried expression. Sarah, David filed an emergency custody motion an hour ago. He's claiming you're mentally unstable and coached the children to lie during their interviews today. The relief I'd felt 5 minutes ago evaporated. Can he do that? He can file it. But given everything we have now, he's walking into a trap of his own making. The hearing will give us the perfect opportunity to present all of his evidence manipulation and coaching documentation to a judge. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Walsh, *Sarah, David is very upset. This has gone too far. Call me tonight if you want to discuss a reasonable solution before lawyers get more involved, *. I showed the message to Rebecca. She smiled grimly. They're panicking. That's the second time they've tried to make a deal, which means they know their evidence is falling apart. So what do? You let them panic while we prepare to destroy David's credibility completely. Because tomorrow morning, when CPS shows up at his door asking why he coached the children, this whole thing is going to flip in our favor. I looked at Patricia's text again. David was upset. Good. It was time for him to learn what real consequences felt like. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, but at 6:47 a.m., my phone rang with news that changed everything. Sarah, it's Margaret Chen from CPS, the real Margaret Chen this time. I'm calling because our unannounced visit to David Walsh's residence yesterday morning revealed some concerning developments. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. What kind of developments? When we arrived at 8:15 a.m., Mr. Walsh wasn't home. The children were alone with Patricia Walsh, who claimed David had gone to work early. But Lily informed us that Daddy had been practicing emergency plans with them since Sunday night. My stomach dropped. What kind of emergency plans? According to Connor, they'd rehearsed what to do if bad people came to ask questions. Patricia had bags packed in the hallway. It appeared they were preparing to leave town. Where's David now? We don't know. He never showed up to his office yesterday, and his cell phone is going straight to voicemail. Sarah, I need to ask, has David ever mentioned having access to significant cash or properties outside the state? The question hit me like ice water. During our marriage, David had always been secretive about his finances, claiming his family had diversified investments that were too complicated for me to understand. I'd been so focused on his emotional manipulation that I'd never considered he might have an escape plan. His family owns property in Montana, I said slowly. Some kind of ranch that belonged to his grandfather. And David always kept a safety deposit box that he said was for family emergencies. We're going to need details about those locations. Ms. Walsh, I'm recommending that the court issue an emergency order preventing David from taking the children out of state. After hanging up with Margaret Chen, I immediately called Rebecca. She answered on the first ring. Sarah, please tell me you're calling with good news. David's missing. CPS thinks he was planning to run with the kids. Silence stretched for 10 seconds. He what? I explained Margaret Chen's call while Rebecca made notes. When I finished, she was quiet for another moment. Sarah, this actually works in our favor. A judge is going to take attempted flight very seriously, especially when combined with everything else we have. But we need to move fast. What do you mean? I'm calling Judge Morrison's clerk right now to request an immediate emergency hearing. If David's planning to run, we can't wait until this afternoon. By 8:30 a.m., I was sitting in courtroom 3B watching Rebecca organize our evidence folders. The bailiff had just announced that David's attorney, Marcus Webb, had requested a 15-minute delay because his client was dealing with a family emergency. Family emergency, Rebecca muttered. More like family flight risk. Judge Morrison entered at exactly 8:45, looking irritated about the early morning session. She was a stern woman in her 50s who I'd heard had zero patience for custody games. Mr. Webb, where's your client? Marcus Webb, a polished man in an expensive suit, stood nervously. Your Honor, Mr. Walsh is experiencing some health issues this morning and... Ms. Martinez, I understand you have concerns about flight risk? Rebecca stood immediately. Yes, Your Honor. Yesterday morning, Child Protective Services conducted an unannounced visit to Mr. Walsh's residence and found evidence that he was preparing to flee the jurisdiction with the minor children. The children were found with packed bags, and Mr. Walsh has since disappeared. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. Mr. Webb, is your client planning to attend this hearing? Your Honor, I haven't been able to reach Mr. Walsh since yesterday afternoon. His phone appears to be turned off. I see. Judge Morrison made a note. Ms. Martinez, present your evidence regarding flight risk. Rebecca approached the bench with Margaret Chen's written report. Your Honor, CPS found that Mr. Walsh had coached the children in emergency procedures and had bags packed for immediate departure. Additionally, we have evidence that Mr. Walsh has access to out-of-state properties and financial resources that would facilitate flight. Judge Morrison reviewed the report quickly. This is very concerning. Mr. Webb, your client filed an emergency motion claiming Ms. Walsh was unfit, but now he's apparently fled rather than present evidence to support that claim? Marcus Webb looked genuinely confused. Your Honor, I was not informed of any travel plans. Based on our last conversation Sunday evening, Mr. Walsh was confident about today's hearing. Ms. Martinez, what are you requesting? Immediate emergency custody to Ms. Walsh, a prohibition on removing the children from the state, and a warrant for Mr. Walsh's return. My phone vibrated in my purse. A text from an unknown number, *Sarah, David's lost his mind. He's at the ranch in Montana. He keeps saying he won't let them destroy his children with lies. He took Connor's insulin. Emma *. Emma? My sister didn't have Connor's insulin. Connor wasn't diabetic. I leaned forward and whispered urgently to Rebecca. She read the text and immediately stood. Your Honor, I just received information that Mr. Walsh may have taken the children out of state. We need immediate law enforcement involvement. Judge Morrison's face went white. Bailiff, contact the sheriff's department immediately. She turned to Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb, if your client has fled with those children, he's looking at kidnapping charges. Marcus Webb was staring at his own phone, which had apparently just buzzed. His face went pale as he read. Your Honor, I just received a message from Mr. Walsh. He says he's protecting the children from false allegations and won't return until the truth comes out. The courtroom erupted into action. Judge Morrison was issuing orders, the bailiff was making calls, and Rebecca was already pulling up information about David's family property in Montana. But I was focused on that text about Connor's insulin. Connor didn't have diabetes, but David's nephew Jake did. Had David gotten confused in his panic? Or was this some kind of coded message? I grabbed Rebecca's arm. The insulin thing doesn't make sense. Connor's not diabetic. She looked at the message again, frowning. Sarah, what if this isn't really from Emma? My blood turned to ice. You think David sent it? I think David's trying to make us chase him in the wrong direction while he goes somewhere else entirely. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Emergency custody is granted to Ms. Walsh effective immediately. Sheriff's Department will coordinate with Montana authorities to locate Mr. Walsh and the minor children. This court is issuing a federal kidnapping warrant. As we left the courthouse, my phone rang. Detective Rivera. Sarah, we just pinged David's phone. He's not in Montana. Where is he? Best we can tell? About 20 miles south of here, near Lake Henderson. But here's the weird part, his phone's been stationary for the past 4 hours. Lake Henderson. Where David used to take the kids fishing, where he taught Connor to skip stones last summer. Where David went when he wanted to disappear from the world and think. Detective, I know where he is. The drive to Lake Henderson felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Detective Rivera had insisted I stay in the car while they approached David's location, but I could see everything from the parking area where they positioned me with Officer Martinez. David's silver Honda was parked at the far end of the lake, near the old fishing pier where he'd brought the kids dozens of times. Through Rivera's binoculars, I could make out 3 figures sitting on the wooden dock, David in the middle, with Lily and Connor on either side of him. They appear calm, Officer Martinez said, adjusting her radio. No signs of immediate distress. My phone buzzed. David was calling me. Detective Rivera's voice crackled through Martinez's radio, let her answer it. We're recording everything. I accepted the call with shaking hands. David. Sarah. His voice was eerily calm, nothing like the fury from his voicemails 2 days ago. I suppose you're feeling pretty proud of yourself right now. Where are my children, David? Our children are right here with me, having a nice morning by the lake. We're feeding ducks and talking about truth versus lies. I could hear Lily's voice in the background asking about the police cars. Daddy's handling it, sweetheart, David said to her. David, you need to bring them back. Right now. Do I? Because according to the news this morning, I'm apparently a child abuser and a kidnapper. Amazing how quickly the narrative changes when you get the right people to listen to your sob story. Through the binoculars, I watched David stand up on the dock, still holding his phone. Connor reached for his hand, and David pulled him closer. You coached them to lie about me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Connor told the psychologist about the story Daddy practiced. David laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. Connor's 6 years old, Sarah. 6-year-olds say whatever adults want to hear. Just like you did for my family all those years, performing the perfect mother role until you decided it was convenient to play victim instead. The recordings prove everything, David. Your timeline strategy, Patricia's coaching notes, all of it. My recordings prove that I was a concerned father trying to document concerning behavior. Your recordings prove that you're unstable enough to hack into private accounts and manipulate evidence. His voice was getting sharper now. Tell me, Sarah, what kind of mother secretly records her own family for years? The question hit harder than I expected because there was a grain of truth in it. I had become paranoid during our marriage, documenting everything because I'd learned not to trust my own memory around David's gaslighting. The kind of mother who learned she couldn't trust you, I said quietly. Through the binoculars, I saw David crouch down to Lily's level. She was crying now, and Connor had moved closer to his sister. You know what Connor asked me this morning? David's voice was conversational again. He asked why Mommy told the police that Daddy was bad. So I explained that sometimes when people feel guilty about their own actions, they try to blame other people instead. You're poisoning them against me. I'm teaching them about accountability. Something you never learned. David paused, and I heard him say something to the children I couldn't make out. Lily wants to know if you're going to jail for lying about us. Detective Rivera's voice came through Martinez's radio. He's moving them toward the edge of the dock. We need to end this conversation and move in. David, I said quickly, whatever you think I did, the kids don't deserve to be scared. Please just bring them to me. Scared? Look around, Sarah. There are 8 police cars surrounding a father having breakfast with his children by a lake. Who exactly is scaring them? I watched through the binoculars as David pointed toward the police vehicles. Both kids turned to look, and even from a distance I could see their confusion and fear. This ends now, I said. Bring them up to the parking lot. This ends when I decide it ends, David replied. I spent 6 years watching you slowly poison my children against healthy discipline and family values. Then I spent 8 months watching you manipulate the legal system with your victim narrative. But I will not spend one more day watching you destroy their relationship with their father. The line went dead. Detective Rivera's voice crackled over the radio. He's hung up. Moving in now. I watched through Officer Martinez's binoculars as Detective Rivera and 3 other officers began their careful approach down the sloped path toward the dock. David had positioned himself and the children at the very end of the pier, about 30 feet over deep water. My phone rang again. Unknown number. Answer it, Officer Martinez instructed. Keep him talking. Sarah, it's Patricia. David's mother's voice was strained, almost panicked. I'm calling because David sent me a very disturbing message an hour ago. What kind of message? He said he was protecting the children from a corrupt system and that he wouldn't let them be brainwashed against their family. Sarah, I think David's having some kind of breakdown. Through the binoculars, I saw David pull both children closer as the officers got within 50 yards. Lily was definitely crying now, and Connor kept looking between his father and the approaching police. Patricia, where are you right now? I'm driving to the lake. David texted me the location 20 minutes ago and said I needed to come witness the truth before it was too late. Her voice cracked. Sarah, I know we've had our differences, but those are my grandchildren down there. The irony was staggering. Patricia, who had spent months helping David build his case against me, was now terrified of what her son might do. Did David say anything else in his messages? He said the Walsh family had survived worse persecution and that sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect what matters most. Patricia's breathing was shallow. Sarah, David's father used to talk like that when he was at his worst. Robert Walsh. The man who died under investigation for elder abuse. Patricia, what exactly happened with David's father? A long pause. Robert became obsessed with the idea that social services was trying to destroy our family. When they started investigating how David's grandmother was getting injured, Robert convinced himself it was all lies and manipulation. He kept saying he wouldn't let them steal his legacy. My stomach dropped. What did he do? He tried to take David's grandmother somewhere safe where the investigators couldn't reach her. She was 93 years old, Sarah. He had her in his truck driving toward Canada when the police found them. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. She died of exposure 2 days later in the hospital. David was following his father's playbook exactly. Through the radio, I heard Detective Rivera's voice. Subject is agitated. Children appear frightened but unharmed. We're holding position 50 feet from the dock. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Tell them to back off or I'm taking the kids somewhere they'll never find us. I showed the message to Officer Martinez, who immediately radioed to Detective Rivera. Sarah, Patricia's voice was urgent. I'm pulling into the parking lot now. David always listened to me more than anyone. Let me try to talk to him. I could see Patricia's white Lexus coming up the gravel road, dust trailing behind it. She parked and got out, a small woman in her 70s wearing a blue cardigan and pearls, looking utterly out of place at a police standoff. Patricia's here, I told Officer Martinez. Ma'am, Martinez called to Patricia, you need to stay behind the vehicle barrier. But Patricia was already walking toward us, her face set with determination. Those are my grandchildren, she said firmly. And David is my son. I know how to handle this. Detective Rivera's voice crackled over the radio. Subject has moved the children to the very edge of the dock. Water depth here is approximately 15 feet. We need to de-escalate immediately. Patricia grabbed the radio from Officer Martinez before anyone could stop her. David Michael Walsh, this is your mother. You bring those babies up here right now. Her voice carried across the water with surprising authority. Through the binoculars, I saw David's head snap up toward the parking area. You don't understand the situation, Mom, David's voice echoed back across the lake. They're trying to take my children based on lies. The only lies I see are the ones you've been telling yourself, Patricia called back, her voice stronger now. I know what we taught Sarah about discipline. I know what you recorded and planned. And I know this isn't protecting anyone. My phone rang. David again. I answered David's call while watching him through the binoculars, his figure rigid at the end of the dock with my children pressed against his sides. You brought her into this, his voice was tight with anger. I specifically told Mom to stay away until this was resolved. David, she's worried about Lily and Connor. We all are. Worried? He laughed bitterly. Mom spent 3 months helping me document your behavior, and now she's switching sides because some cops showed up? That's the Walsh family loyalty I grew up with. Through the binoculars, I could see him gesturing toward Patricia while speaking to the children. Lily was pulling on his sleeve, trying to get his attention. What are you telling them right now? I demanded. I'm explaining that sometimes adults make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes have consequences that affect the whole family. His tone shifted to that clinical detachment I remembered from our worst fights. Lily asked why Grandma Patricia looks upset. I told her that Grandma is learning what happens when you don't support family during difficult times. Patricia's voice cut across the lake again, sharper now. David, stop manipulating those children and listen to me. Your father tried this same paranoid nonsense, and it killed your grandmother. The silence that followed stretched for 30 seconds. When David spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. Don't you dare compare me to him. Then stop acting like him. Patricia shouted back. Robert convinced himself everyone was lying, everyone was against us, everyone was trying to destroy our family. Sound familiar? My phone crackled as David's grip apparently tightened. Dad was protecting our family from a corrupt system. Just like I'm protecting my children now. Your father killed a 93-year-old woman because he couldn't admit he was wrong. Patricia's voice broke. I watched him choose his pride over her life, and I will not watch you choose your pride over my grandchildren's safety. Detective Rivera's voice came through the radio. Subject appears increasingly agitated. Children are asking to leave. We need to end this situation. Through the binoculars, I watched Connor tug on David's jacket and point toward the parking area where all the police cars were visible. Lily had sat down on the dock and was crying openly now. David, I said into the phone, Connor wants to come home. Look at him. Connor wants stability, which he's never had with you constantly undermining consistent discipline. Connor wants his mother, I interrupted. And Lily wants to stop crying. And you want to prove you're not like your father? Then don't terrorize children to make your point. I am nothing like my father. David's voice was ice cold. Dad lost control because he didn't plan properly. I planned every detail of this situation. The words sent chills through me. What plan, David? Did you really think I'd just take the kids and run without an endgame? I've been transferring money to offshore accounts for 6 months. I have new identities prepared. I have a boat waiting at Marina del Rey that leaves for Mexico tonight. Officer Martinez was frantically writing notes and signaling to other units. Patricia had gone pale beside our vehicle. Sarah, David continued conversationally, you have exactly 10 minutes to call Detective Rivera and tell him to withdraw all units. Otherwise, Lily and Connor are going to learn what international travel is really like. You can't just kidnap our children to another country. Watch me. 10 minutes, Sarah. And if I see any officers moving closer to this dock, we're leaving immediately via a route they'll never track. He paused. Oh, and Sarah? My boat captain doesn't ask questions about passengers who might be sleeping during departure. Wouldn't want the kids to accidentally say something that might cause problems at sea. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in horror while Patricia grabbed my arm. He's going to drug them, she whispered. Sarah, David's completely lost his mind. Detective Rivera's voice crackled urgently over the radio. All units hold position. Do not approach the dock. Suspect has threatened to flee the country with hostages. Patricia was pacing behind our vehicle, her composed demeanor completely shattered. The boat captain he mentioned, I think I know who that is. David's been friends with Marcus Petrov since college. Marcus runs charter fishing out of Marina del Rey, but he's had run-ins with customs before. Officer Martinez was coordinating with what sounded like half the sheriff's department. We've got units heading to the marina now, but if Walsh has a boat scheduled for tonight, he's been planning this for weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from David, * 9 minutes remaining. I can see officers with binoculars. Have them step back or we're leaving now, *. Through the binoculars, I watched David check his watch while Connor tugged insistently on his sleeve. Even from this distance, I could see my 6-year-old son's distress as he pointed repeatedly toward the parking area where we were stationed. He won't really take them to Mexico, I said, more to convince myself than anyone else. David's methodical, but he's not completely insane. Patricia turned to me with tears in her eyes. Sarah, 3 years ago David asked me detailed questions about Robert's attempted flight with his grandmother. He wanted to know every mistake his father made, every way the police tracked them down. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I thought he was just trying to understand what happened to our family. Now I realize he was taking notes. My blood turned to ice. Notes for what? For how to do it better. How to disappear completely without getting caught. Detective Rivera's voice came through the radio again. Marina del Rey confirms a vessel named Second Chance is scheduled for departure at 11 p.m. tonight. Registered owner Marcus Petrov. They're moving to intercept, but if Walsh has backup transportation to the marina, we're looking at a narrow window. I checked my phone. 10:47 a.m. David had given himself over 12 hours to get from Lake Henderson to Marina del Rey, plenty of time to take back roads and avoid detection if he'd planned his route carefully. My phone rang. Unknown number again. Sarah, it's Margaret Chen from CPS. I'm at the Walsh family residence executing a search warrant, and I found something you need to know about immediately. What is it? I pressed the phone closer to my ear as Officer Martinez leaned in to listen. Hidden in Patricia Walsh's bedroom closet, we found detailed files on both children dating back to 2019. Medical records, behavioral assessments, even photographs of minor injuries with dates and descriptions. Margaret's voice was tense. Sarah, these files document a systematic pattern of child abuse, but they're written as if you were the perpetrator. That's impossible. I would never. The handwriting analysis will take time, but preliminary examination suggests multiple authors. It looks like David and Patricia have been building a comprehensive false history for years, not just months. Patricia had stopped pacing and was staring at me with an unreadable expression. She'd heard every word. Margaret, how detailed are these files? Detailed enough to convince any family court judge or CPS investigator who didn't look too closely at the evidence. They have fake witness statements, manipulated photos, even forged medical reports claiming the children showed signs of trauma during visits with you. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. How long would something like this take to create? Years. Sarah, this wasn't David's recent panic response. This was a long-term strategy to steal your children by completely destroying your credibility as a mother. Patricia was still staring at me, her face pale. When I ended the call, she stepped closer. He showed me some of those files 6 months ago, she said quietly. David said he was protecting himself in case she tried to make false accusations during the custody battle. I never imagined. She trailed off, looking toward the dock where her son held my children hostage. My phone buzzed, *6 minutes. I can see someone approach the grandmother. Any more interference and we leave immediately, *. David had been planning this for years. Not just the custody battle, not just the CPS report, but the complete systematic destruction of my relationship with my children. And now he was minutes away from disappearing with them forever. Detective Rivera's voice crackled over the radio with urgency. We've got a problem. Marina Del Rey just reported that the Second Chance moved its departure time up to 2 p.m. If Walsh has alternate transportation standing by, he could make that window. 2 p.m. That was only 3 hours away. My phone rang again. David, right on schedule. Time's up, Sarah. I can see officers repositioning, which tells me you're not taking this seriously. His voice was eerily calm. We're leaving now. Through the binoculars, I watched in horror as David stood up and began walking the children toward the far end of the dock, away from the police presence. There was a small service road on that side of the lake that I'd forgotten about, one that would let him avoid the main parking area completely. David, wait. Connor, Lily, we're going on an adventure, I could hear him saying to the children. Remember the games we used to play about explorers discovering new places? Well, today we're going to be real explorers. Patricia suddenly grabbed the radio from Officer Martinez. David. The files. I know about all of it. David stopped walking. Through the binoculars, I could see him turn back toward us, his posture rigid. What files, Mom? The ones hidden in my closet. The fake medical records, the manufactured evidence, all of it. CPS found everything 30 minutes ago. Patricia's voice carried clearly across the water. 3 years of lies, David. 3 years of planning to frame Sarah. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When David finally responded, his voice had lost its calculated calm. You went through my private research? Your private research? Patricia laughed bitterly. You used my house to store evidence of fraud. You involved me in a conspiracy to fabricate child abuse records. My phone buzzed with a text, * she's lying to manipulate the situation. Don't believe her desperate attempts to save herself, *. But Patricia wasn't done. I have pictures, David. CPS showed me everything before I drove here. The forged doctor signatures, the manipulated photographs, even fake witness statements from people who don't exist. Her voice broke. How could you make me an accomplice to something this evil? Detective Rivera was speaking rapidly into his radio, coordinating what sounded like multiple agencies. Through the binoculars, I watched David crouch down between Lily and Connor, apparently explaining something to them urgently. My phone rang. David again, but this time his voice was different, strained, almost desperate. You don't understand what you've done, he said. Those files were insurance. Legal protection in case you tried to weaponize the system against me. Legal protection? I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. David, you forged medical records. You created fake abuse reports. You've been planning to kidnap our children for years. I've been planning to protect them. From your instability, from your manipulation, from a family court system that always sides with mothers regardless of the truth. Through the binoculars, I saw Connor pull away from David and start walking back toward the main dock, toward the police. David caught him by the arm, but gently, still maintaining the facade that this was some kind of game. Connor wants to go home, I said. Look at him, David. He's 6 years old and he's terrified. Connor's confused because of all the police cars. Once we're somewhere calm, away from this chaos, both kids will understand that Daddy was protecting them. Officer Martinez was listening to multiple radio channels, her expression growing more tense by the minute. She turned to me with grim news. Sarah, they intercepted communications suggesting David has a helicopter standing by at a private airfield 20 minutes from here. If he reaches that aircraft, tracking becomes exponentially more difficult. A helicopter. David wasn't just planning to drive to the marina, he had multiple escape routes prepared. Patricia was staring at her phone, scrolling through what looked like text messages. Sarah, I'm getting messages from David's attorney. Marcus Webb is asking where David is because federal agents just showed up at his office with warrants. Federal agents? Apparently creating false CPS reports and forged medical documents is a federal crime when it's part of a kidnapping conspiracy. Patricia looked up at me with something like admiration. David may have planned this for years, but he forgot that the FBI takes child abduction cases very seriously. My phone buzzed, * helicopter ETA 15 minutes. Say goodbye, Sarah, *. David had just made his biggest mistake, he'd revealed his escape timeline. I stared at David's text about the helicopter, my mind racing. 15 minutes. That's all the time we had before he could disappear with my children forever. Patricia, I said urgently, does David know you're here willingly, or does he think you came because the police made you? She looked confused by the question. I told him I was coming to witness the truth, like he asked. Why? Because he still trusts you. He doesn't know you've turned against him yet. I grabbed her arm. Patricia, you need to get down to that dock and get close enough to grab the kids. Sarah, I'm 73 years old. I can't physically overpower my son. You don't need to overpower him. You need to get him to separate from Lily and Connor for just 30 seconds. Long enough for the officers to move in. Detective Rivera's voice crackled over the radio. All units, we have visual confirmation of helicopter approach from the southeast. ETA approximately 12 minutes. Patricia was staring down at the dock where David kept checking his phone and scanning the skies. What exactly are you asking me to do? Tell him you brought something he needs. Something from the evidence files that proves I'm lying. Get him to walk away from the kids for just a moment to look at it. Officer Martinez shook her head. Ma'am, we can't ask a civilian to. I'll do it, Patricia said firmly. But I need something convincing to show him. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, genuine remorse mixed with determination. Sarah, I helped create this monster. Let me help stop him. Margaret Chen's voice came through my phone, which was still connected from our earlier call. Sarah, are you still there? I found something else in the files that might help. I put the call on speaker. What is it, Margaret? Hidden in David's fabricated medical records, there's a psychiatric evaluation report dated last month. It claims you've been diagnosed with severe borderline personality disorder and recommends immediate supervised custody only. Her voice was tight with anger. The problem is, the doctor who allegedly wrote this report has been dead for 6 months. Patricia's face went white. David used Dr. Morrison's letterhead? But Robert. Robert was Dr. Morrison's patient before he died. David has access to his files because of the estate settlement. Dr. Morrison treated your husband? I asked. For paranoid delusions, yes. The same delusions that led to your grandmother's death. Patricia pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I'm going to call David and tell him I brought Dr. Morrison's real files about Robert. Files that prove mental illness runs in the Walsh family, and that David is exhibiting the same symptoms his father did. Detective Rivera's radio crackled. Helicopter is 8 minutes out. We need to move now. Patricia was already walking down the slope toward the dock, her phone pressed to her ear. Through the binoculars, I could see David answer his phone while keeping one hand on each child. David, it's Mom. I need you to listen very carefully, Patricia's voice carried across the water. I didn't just come here because of Sarah. I came because I found Dr. Morrison's real psychiatric files about your father. The ones that explain everything about why he tried to take your grandmother. David's posture changed immediately. Even from this distance, I could see him straighten up, his attention completely focused on Patricia. What are you talking about? Dad's medical records were destroyed after he died. No, David. I kept copies. And what they show? Patricia paused dramatically, now only 50 feet from the dock. They show that Robert was suffering from the same persecution complex his father had. And his grandfather before that. It's genetic, David. The paranoid delusions, the belief that everyone is conspiring against the family, it runs in the Walsh bloodline. That's impossible, David said, but his voice carried uncertainty for the first time. Dr. Morrison documented everything. Robert's belief that social workers were part of a conspiracy to destroy our family. His conviction that taking your grandmother away was protective action rather than kidnapping. Patricia was walking steadily closer. David, you're exhibiting the exact same symptoms your father did right before his breakdown. Through the binoculars, I watched David take several steps away from the children, moving toward Patricia with agitated gestures. Lily and Connor remained at the end of the dock, both looking confused and frightened. Show me these files, David demanded. Patricia held up a manila folder. They're right here. But David, you need to understand what this means for Lily and Connor. If this condition is genetic, if it's already affecting your judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk Mom, Daddy says we're going on a helicopter ride, but I want to go home. Can you come get us? Lily asterisk. Lily had somehow gotten hold of a phone. My heart hammered as I quickly typed back. Asterisk stay exactly where you are, sweetie. Mommy is coming to get you right now, asterisk. Detective Rivera's voice was urgent over the radio. Subject has moved 15 feet from the children. Patricia Walsh is engaging him in conversation about documents. All units prepare to move on my signal. The helicopter noise was getting louder now, somewhere beyond the tree line. David kept glancing between Patricia's folder and the sky, his desperation becoming more obvious by the minute. Mom, I don't have time for this right now, he called out. We need to be ready for pickup in 5 minutes. David Michael Walsh, Patricia's voice turned sharp with maternal authority. You will look at these files right now before you destroy your children's lives the same way your father destroyed mine. She was magnificent. 73 years old, standing on a dock facing down her delusional son, using every ounce of motherly manipulation she'd perfected over decades. And it was working. David was walking toward her, leaving my children alone at the end of the pier. Detective Rivera's voice came through the radio one final time. All units, go now. The next 30 seconds unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance of justice. Detective Rivera and 3 officers moved swiftly but silently down the slope while David stood with his back to the children, arguing with Patricia over the manila folder. The helicopter was circling overhead now, its pilot apparently confused by the police presence below. David, look at page 12, Patricia was saying, holding the folder just out of his reach. Dr. Morrison's notes about your father's final episode. The exact same paranoid thoughts you've been having about Sarah. Give me those files, Mom. David lunged for the folder just as Detective Rivera reached the dock. David Walsh, you're under arrest, Rivera's voice cut through the helicopter noise. Step away from the children and keep your hands visible. David spun around, his face contorting with rage and disbelief. You used her to trick me. No, son, Patricia said quietly, lowering the empty folder. I used myself to save my grandchildren from repeating our family's worst mistakes. Lily and Connor ran toward the officers, both crying but unharmed. Detective Rivera had David in handcuffs within seconds while backup officers secured the children. Above us, the helicopter was already banking away as its pilot apparently realized his passenger wouldn't be keeping the appointment. You'll never prove any of this was real abuse, David shouted as they led him up the slope. Those discipline methods were family tradition, approved by my mother. Actually, I said, stepping forward with my phone recording, I can prove exactly what it was. I played the audio file from his cloud storage, David's own voice detailing his CPS timeline strategy and coaching plans. Then Patricia's text about making the investigation go away. Finally, his recorded instructions to me about using the basement timeout room and wooden spoon punishments. David Walsh, Detective Rivera said formally, you're being charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, filing false police reports, conspiracy to commit fraud, and interfering with a custody order. You have the right to remain silent. But David wasn't remaining silent. Sarah, this isn't over. Those kids need structure and discipline, not your permissive parenting. You'll ruin them. Mr. Walsh, Patricia said sharply, walking up to face her son, the only person who ruined anything is you. Just like your father ruined our family with his paranoid delusions. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. Sarah, those children belong with their mother. I'm prepared to testify to that in any court proceeding. 6 weeks later, I sat in Judge Morrison's courtroom for the final custody hearing. David appeared via video link from county jail, where he was awaiting trial on federal kidnapping charges. His elaborate evidence fabrication had unraveled completely under FBI investigation, revealing 3 years of systematic fraud. Ms. Walsh, Judge Morrison said, reviewing the settlement documents, the court is awarding you full physical and legal custody of Lily and Connor Walsh. Mr. Walsh's parental rights will remain suspended pending the outcome of his criminal trial. Marcus Webb, David's attorney, looked defeated as he signed the paperwork. Your Honor, my client wishes to appeal. Mr. Webb, your client orchestrated a multi-year conspiracy to frame the children's mother for abuse while planning to flee the country with them. I suggest he focus on his criminal defense rather than custody appeals. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca handed me the final documentation. Sarah, it's over. He can't touch you or the kids ever again. Patricia was waiting by my car with Lily and Connor, who'd spent the hearing day at her house making cookies and playing board games. The woman who'd once taught me harsh discipline methods had become my children's fiercest protector. I owe you an apology that will take the rest of my life to make, she told me quietly. But I promise you this, David will never manipulate anyone in our family again. That evening, as I tucked Lily and Connor into their own beds in our own house, Connor looked up at me with serious 6-year-old eyes. Mommy, are we safe now? Yes, baby. We're completely safe. Good, Lily chimed in from her room next door. Because Grandma Patricia says Daddy was sick in his brain, and sick people need to get better before they can take care of kids. I kissed them both goodnight and walked downstairs to find Patricia's latest text. David pled guilty today. 15 years federal prison, no parole. The children will be adults before he's released. You can finally breathe, Sarah. David had reported me to CPS for discipline methods his own family taught me. But in trying to destroy me, he'd exposed his own systematic abuse and lost everything he'd claimed to protect. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth speak for itself.